this is so suspenseful. Chapter 13 on page 197. It was silent in the car, now that it was over, now that Winston didn't have any puzzles to think about or look forward to. He was miserably aware of just how hot, sticky, and tired he was. His hair was plastered to his head. His t-shirt was clinging to him like it was coated with glue. Mal didn't look much better. He was slumped over and might have been on the edge of sleep. Jake's hair had a tendency to curl on humid days. He looked like someone had given him a haircut with an egg beater. Mr. Garvey looked weariest of all and had giant splotches of sweat under each arm. They all looked gross. Their depressed expressions weren't helping. They'd been so close to winning. If the girls had just gotten the answer a little faster, or better yet, allowed Mr. Garvey to tell them the answer. Winston understood Bethany's desire to solve it herself, but he couldn't get around the fact that it had cost both teams $25,000. And the cheaters had won. Maybe they should have told the girls they knew who the cheater was. Maybe that would have made them more interested in winning immediately. Their teacher had tried calling the potato chip factory, hoping to speak to Dimitri Simon, but he was never able to get a human on the line. Winston wanted to ask Mr. Garvey what they were going to do now. They didn't know for a fact that West Meadow won, but it seemed a good bet. When Brendan and his team were called up as the winners, was Mr. Garvey going to stand up and yell, "Not so fast"? Ooh, that would be the start of an ugly scene. "Well, at least your rival didn't win," Mel said in the passenger seat to Mr. Garvey. It was the first thing anybody had said in a good 10 minutes. Mr. Garvey grunted. That seemed to be all the reply Mel was going to get. He turned and looked back out the window. Jake and Winston exchanged a sad glance and looked out their windows. Nothing else to do. Mr. Garvey was not about to be consoled. If the girls had acted differently, they would have won. But even before that, if Mr. Garvey hadn't thrown the computer, they would have taken the prize money themselves with no need to split it. That was going to eat at Mr. Garvey for a long, long time. Winston kept thinking about Brendan. It was hard to believe that kid had been a cheater all along, or was working with the cheater. What was Brendan's relationship to the man in the green jacket? How could that wacky 7th grader possibly know that vicious and mean grown-up? He kept hearing Brendan's tunefully happy voice in his head, his excitement about meeting Winston back at the start of all this, his remorse at the Adventureland parking lot. And most jarringly of all, the fact that Brendan had offered to help, had offered to give him an answer. That's not what people do when they're trying to cheat to win. They don't offer to cheat to help the competition. Winston was slowly becoming more and more sure that Brendan wasn't the cheater. Maybe Brendan had called him. There had to be some other explanation as to how Winston's name had gotten into that memo pad. Somebody else was behind all this. Not that enthusiastic, puzzle-happy kid. Sure looked bad, though. Why else had Brendan called? Disguising his voice, no less, if not to scope out the competition. Why did the man in the green jacket hit every team except West Meadow? Their teacher didn't even believe there was a cheater. Of course, that was before the man in the green jacket had made his dramatic entrance, complete with the fireworks. Brendan's teacher would certainly believe him now, after Winston pointed at Jake's face, which was a rainbow of black and blue bruises. "Well, when we get there," Mr. Garvey now said, "let me do all the talking." "What are you going to say?" Jake asked. "I don't want to make a public spectacle. I want to reach Dimitri and take him aside for a few minutes. If I'm able to do that, I'll tell him about the cheater and how we have proof that it's the boy on the West Meadow team." He tapped the steering wheel thoughtfully and continued. "I don't know what Dimitri Simon will do. Maybe he'll divide the prize money among the rest of the teams. Maybe he'll ask if anybody else has the final answer and give prize money only to those teams. All I know is we're not letting West Meadow and that kid get away with this." I feel bad for the other kids on that team, Mel said. Well, for all we know, the kids are all on it. Don't feel sorry for anybody right now. They fell back into silence. Winston wished he had never thought to call Ray Marietta. Who knew that path would lead to Brendan? Winston was certain Mr. Garvey was going to accuse the wrong person of cheating, but there was nothing he could do to stop it. He thought ahead to the expression of disbelief and betrayal that would surely flood Brendan's face when Dimitri Simon refused to hand over the prize money, and told him the reason why. Do we still have the cheaters' things? Winston asked. They're in the back. Why? Mr. Garvey said. I don't know, I just want to see them. Winston reached behind him, difficult with a seatbelt on, and grabbed the plastic bag with the cheater's stuff in it. A coil of strong twine, a string of firecrackers, a set of mouse traps. And here was the bottle filled with broken glass, its neck stuffed with foil to keep the shards in. Winston thought of the man in the green jacket sitting in his garage, smashing glass with a hammer and carefully pouring the broken bits into a bottle, with a satisfied smile on his face. Or was he? Could he really be Brendan's older brother or some other relative? Who else would do something so extreme to a kid Winston's age? Looking at that bottle, Winston found his thoughts moving into a new direction. If it wasn't Brendan who started all this, then who had? If the man in the jacket was working with someone, who could it be? Winston had a hard time believing it was any kid, not just Brendan. So, was it one of the grown-ups? One of the teachers? Would a teacher go as far as to hire someone to sabotage all the other teams? Winston glared at the back of Mr. Garvey's head. It didn't seem so outrageous after all, now did it? All it took was a desire to win, multiplied by 1,000,000,000. Mr. Garvey was halfway there himself, and a few of the other teachers were right there with him. Mr. Garvey wanted to show up his rival teacher from another school. Maybe another teacher needed that prize money for a special project. Maybe a third teacher simply never wanted to lose. He was holding the bottle up to the sunlight, revolving it slowly back and forth, watching the rays bounce off the shards. Something was nibbling away at the back of his mind. Something to do with this bottle. Would you get a flat tire just because you drove over some glass? He asked. Not a booby trap like this, but some regular glass lying on the ground. Maybe, said Mr. Garvey, it is possible. That happened to my bicycle a few times, Jake said. Yeah, Winston said. He was thinking of Brendan Root's teacher who had dismissed the notion of a cheater so readily. Anybody could get a flat tire. He'd recently had one himself. At that point, Winston didn't know how to argue with him. And just like that, all the pieces slammed together in his mind. If Winston was standing, he would have fallen down. He put his hands up to his head to keep it from popping off his neck entirely. What's wrong with you? Jake asked. Brendan isn't the cheater. He's not? Winston shook his head. It's his teacher. What? Mr. Garvey said. How could you know that? It's the broken glass. Brendan's teacher refused to believe that someone was cheating. I told him about the flat tires, and he still didn't believe me. Do you know what he said? What? Said Mel. He said, I ran over some broken glass myself a couple months ago. I had to wait 2 hours for a tow truck. Yeah, Mr. Garvey said. So what? I never told him the flat tires were caused by broken glass. They all thought about that for a few moments. Mr. Garvey said slowly, Did I say I ran over some broken glass also? Well, he said it in such a way that he knew the flat tires had been caused by broken glass, Winston insisted. How could he have known that? Mr. Garvey was shaking his head. Even if you're right, Winston, That is not a lot to hang your hat on. It's certainly not proof. Well, we might be able to prove it, Winston said. Maybe. How? Well, first of all, what was that teacher's name? Does anybody remember? Oh, yeah, I do, said Mr. Garvey. I've seen him around. He's not a teacher, he's an administrator, a vice principal or something. Lester something. No, wait. Lester is his last name. Carl Lester. Good. Could I borrow your phone again? Winston asked. Mr. Garvey looked at Winston in the rear-view mirror, surprise in his eyes. Who are you calling? Your police friend again? You can't call the police on this guy when you don't have proof. I'm not calling anybody. Mal is. Mal sat up straight at the mention of his name. I am? Who am I calling? Mr. Lester's wife. We're going to take a break right there.